Back on December 15, 2017, Canadian businessman and philanthropist Barry Sherman and his wife Honey were not expected to be at home. The couple had recently put their 12,000 square foot mansion in Toronto up for sale, and it was open house day. As agreed, soon after 10 a.m. that morning, the real estate agent Elise Stern began showing potential buyers around the house. After the two upper floors, it was time for the basement, where some of the best luxury features of the home, a lap pool and hot tub, were located. But as Elise opened a locked glass door at the end of the hallway and took a couple of steps toward the pool, she abruptly stopped. The scene in front of Elise made her immediately turn and run. Luckily, that was enough to stop her clients from seeing what she had just witnessed. There, hanging from a metal railing of the lap pool, side by side, were the bodies of Barry and Honey Sherman.
Discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. I'm Joe, the host, and thank you for joining today. And if you hear any bumps and bangs during the episode today, just random noises, it's because I told my kiddo to go clean his room, and it's located directly above the studio here. He's not happy about cleaning up, and it was starting to look like if the police were investigating a crime scene, they'd get to his room and say, yeah, looks like a big struggle happened here. It's awful. So he's reluctantly working on it. We're about to get started, but before we do, make sure you subscribe to 10-Minute Murder wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube. I know some people listen on both their podcast app as well as YouTube, whichever is convenient in the moment. So if you do that, make sure you subscribe on YouTube as well. And if you exclusively listen on YouTube and have made it through most, if not all, of the episodes, there are about twice as many of those available on any podcast app. And you can also connect with 10-Minute Murder on social media. Links are in the show notes of this episode. Now to today's story. Bernard Charles Sherman, or Barry, as everybody knew him, was born February 25, 1942, into a Jewish family in Toronto. His father, Herbert, ran a zipper manufacturer, where young Barry would help every now and then. He was an excellent zipper packer, doing a better job than many of the paid workers, but in turn, Barry did not succeed in the same way in school. His mind often wandered during the classroom time, causing his teachers to yell at him on more than one occasion. Those close to him have said that Barry's problems at school resulted from insomnia, caused by the fact that his mind never shut off. He was always thinking and scheming something. In addition to his sleeping problems, Barry was pretty shy and awkward, a boy with not too many friends. He was not necessarily someone you would have guessed would eventually become one of the richest people in the world, but that's exactly what happened. After his father died of a heart attack when Barry was just 10 years old, his mother, Sarah, headed back to work as an occupational therapist. And what did Barry do? He decided to start taking his studies seriously, and I mean very seriously. Even though many had not seen it yet, Barry was actually incredibly smart and could absorb information like a sponge when he focused, thanks to his photographic memory. Soon enough, the hard work started to pay off. In the final year of high school, Barry discovered his aptitude for math and science and won a Canada-wide physics contest. From that point on, nothing slowed him down. Barry eventually graduated in engineering physics from the University of Toronto and completed a PhD at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, with a thesis on satellite technology. Barry had actually been the youngest ever entering the engineering science program at U of T back in 1958 at the age of 16. Meanwhile, his uncle, Louis Winter, had become something of a father figure to the young genius. Barry had spent several summers working at Louis's company, Empire Laboratories, which made cheaper versions of medicine like aspirin and Valium. When both Louis and his wife then died in 1965, only 17 days apart, Barry bought Empire together with his friend Joel Ulster for $250,000 and then sold it in 1973 for around $2 million to ICN Pharmaceuticals. Afterward, they together created Apotex Inc. Starting with 2 employees, Barry eventually expanded Apotex to a workforce of over 10,000, making it one of Canada's largest pharmaceutical companies, selling over 260 products in more than 115 countries, with annual sales exceeding $1 billion. And of course, all of that made Barry Sherman a very wealthy man. By 2017, with an estimated net worth of $3.2 billion, according to Forbes, he was the 12th wealthiest person in Canada. At this point, Barry Sherman was also a family man. Honey Reich, who was born in a displaced person camp to Polish Holocaust survivors, met Barry in 1970, just after graduating from the University of Toronto. Her mother had suggested that she volunteer at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto to meet a Jewish doctor, and Honey agreed. Eventually, a nurse who happened to be married to Joel Ulster fixed her up with Barry. Even though being polar opposites and Barry not being exactly a doctor, the two immediately hit it off and got married a year later. According to those close to the couple, Honey and Barry were like yin and yang. Barry was socially awkward and a workaholic, and Honey was very outgoing, cunning and witty with a salty tongue. Together, they complemented each other. The Shermans ended up having 4 children. One, as Barry put it, natural daughter named Lauren, and 3 more children, Jonathan, Alexandra, and Kellen, they had by using a surrogate, as Honey had suffered several miscarriages. In 1990, when their youngest was born, the family moved into their custom-built home in New York on Old Colony Road. Being a father did not slow Barry down one bit. He still spent most of his time at Apotex offices, usually more than 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. At night, if he slept, he kept a notepad and pen nearby his bed just in case he woke up with an idea. In addition, although Barry regularly turned up at charity galas with Honey, who had a wide circle of friends, his social skills had not gotten any better since childhood. He was virtually incapable of small talk and so withdrawn that he seemed to not enjoy human interaction at all. But he took good care of his family and was well known for having a habit of quietly writing checks to Apotex employees who had run into financial trouble. All while he spent next to nothing on himself and usually drove cars until they fell apart. But in 2017, it was time for an improvement. The Shermans had been living at Old Colony Road for over 30 years, which is a long, long time, considering that they'd even been in court due to their house being built poorly. Now, mainly of Honey's decision, they were planning to move to Forest Hill, one of Toronto's most exclusive neighborhoods, in a house that would easily cost $30 million to build, decorate, and furnish. They would be closer to their growing grandchildren, friends, and business partners. Still, Barry was not too happy with the idea, but he was going along with it. As he said to one of his friends, quote, I wish I was staying here, but my wife wants to move, so we're moving. On November 27th of that year, their North York house was listed for $6.9 million and described as an architectural, modern masterpiece. Soon enough, real estate agents began showing the property to potential buyers. Everything seemed to be going according to the plan until something went horribly wrong. Late in the afternoon of December 13th, Honey arrived at Apotex's headquarters in Toronto's outskirts to discuss some things with the builders of their new house in Forest Hill. Afterwards, she headed home to finish preparing for a family holiday in Florida. In a couple of days, she would go down, and then Barry planned to join a week later. Later that evening, Apotex employees received a routine email from Barry about a drug they had been developing. After that, both he and Honey went MIA. No one heard from Barry overnight, which was unusual because he rarely slept, but nobody thought they needed to worry too much. Not even the following day when he didn't show up to the office. Yeah, Barry was a workaholic, but he was also a very private person who never told anybody about his movements. It was not until December 15th that the reason for the sudden radio silence was found out. That Friday morning, at 11:44, Toronto police responded to the 911 call for 2 unresponsive people found during an open house. As 2 officers and the paramedics entered the front door and quickly ran down to the pool area of 50 Colony Road, they were met with a strange scene. Multi-billionaire Barry Sherman was in a seated position next to a 3-foot-high railing of a lap pool. His wife, of 40 years, Honey, beside him. While it was not immediately clear what had happened, it was definitely not a good sign. Both had a man's leather belt around their neck, tied above their head to the said railing. It was soon concluded that the help had come way too late. The Shermans had been dead for at least a day, as rigor mortis had already passed and the bodies were relaxed. Both were fully dressed and wearing jackets that had been slightly pulled off their shoulders. While Barry's face was untouched, Honey had a bruise on her face. As if the news of the couple's death was not shocking enough to their friends and family, police initially told the press that they were treating the case as a possible murder-suicide committed by Barry Sherman and were not looking for other suspects. Unsurprisingly, family members pushed back at the claims, releasing a statement that read, quote, "Our parents shared an enthusiasm for life and commitment to their family and community. We are shocked and think it's irresponsible that police sources have reportedly advised the media of a theory which neither the family, their friends, nor their colleagues believe to be true." Soon enough, details revealed by 2 different autopsies and private investigations began to poke holes in the police's theory. It was concluded both Barry and Honey had died of ligature compression, most likely caused by the leather belts found around their necks. While it's not completely impossible that one of the 2 could have killed the other first and staged the body, the person in question could not have then just looped the belt over their neck and then to the pool railing and sat down. On top of that, there were markings on both Barry and Honey's wrists, suggesting their hands may have been tied at some point, but the murderer had taken those ropes with them. Finally, on January 26, 2018, a homicide detective stated that the police were now describing the case as, quote, "a double homicide investigation," and that both Honey and Barry Sherman were in fact targeted. But by who? While there has been some speculation about who could have been responsible for the death of the Shermans, we seem not to be much closer to finding out the truth. It's highly possible that the murders had something to do with Barry's work and his business associates. Some of them had criminal records, and his actions have angered some, one of them being his own cousin. Barry had been in court against the Winters due to their claims that he had wrongly handled selling his uncle's company, Empire Laboratories, and left his cousins empty-handed. Around the time of the murders, Barry had just won a ruling that the Winters owed him $300,000 in legal fees, which gives a pretty good motive. Carrie Winter actually admitted that he had not only the reason to kill his cousin, but the opportunity since he set his own working hours. Carrie stated he even fantasized about killing Barry, but he did not, as he had been watching Peaky Blinders on Netflix, and then attended a Cocaine Anonymous meeting that night. And so here we are, more than 4 years later, still without answers. However, a recent important update on the case happened on December 14th, 2021, when Toronto police released security camera footage of a suspect. In the video, we can see a person dressed in dark clothing walking down a sidewalk on a snow-covered night. While it's impossible to see the exact features of the individual, authorities are hoping that somebody would recognize them just by their distinctive style of walking. And it is noteworthy that the police stated there is a reason why the individual in the video is considered a suspect and not just a person of interest. Only time will tell if the footage will actually help solve the murder of Barry and Honey Sherman, or if the case will remain a bizarre mystery. That's today's 10-Minute Murder. Brief and bingeable true crime. Thanks for listening today, and if you have not yet subscribed, I encourage you to do that before you go. Just hit subscribe wherever you're listening right now, including on YouTube if that's where you happen to be listening. Also, you can connect with 10-Minute Murder on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Links for that are in the show notes of this episode. And if you have friends and you think maybe they're into brief true crime stories like this, let them know about 10-Minute Murder. Thanks for listening. Be safe and have a good night.